What's going on, guys? Matt back again, this time for another college football ranking. Let's go ahead and throw up the Week 10 ranking. I'm going to run through it real quick. I had Clemson, Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, Penn State, Baylor, Minnesota, Oregon, Georgia, and Oklahoma. Clemson played Wofford at home. They did almost what I predicted. I predicted another 59-7 victory, but this one was a 59-14 victory. Clemson keeps rolling. They're doing what they're expected to do. Honestly, I feel like with the way they've performed the last 4 weeks, ever since they got out of that bye week after the North Carolina game, that they should not be number 4 in the AP. I feel like they should definitely be. I mean, if you've been watching my videos, I've had them at number 1 all year. Given their performance the last 4 weeks, completely dominating teams like they're supposed to, they should definitely be in the top 3 at least. Putting them at 4 the way that the AP poll has been doing tells me that they just kind of expect them to lose a game. But at this point, it seems kind of ridiculous to have them at 4 in the AP poll with the way they're just completely killing people. Alabama had a bye, LSU had a bye, Ohio State had a bye, Penn State had a bye. Baylor played West Virginia at home, pulled out a close victory. They won 17-14. They stay undefeated. They most likely will lose to Oklahoma when they play Oklahoma, but they're still undefeated and will clearly remain in my top 10. Minnesota had a bye. Oregon played Southern Cal. They killed them. I don't have the score here. Last I checked, I think they were up by like 20 points. So I know they soundly defeated Southern Cal. Georgia played Florida. They won 24-17. I watched all of this game, and if you did too, then you should know that the score really doesn't represent how much better Georgia was than Florida. I had someone I know recently say that Florida is the most overrated team in college football this year, and I couldn't agree more. I really couldn't agree more. They're not a bad team, especially trading out Trask for Franks was definitely an improvement for the team. But I've talked about it before, and I'm going to talk about it again right now. Florida should have 3 losses. The refs screwed us in that game against Florida. The SEC refs did that just so they could have their precious top 10 matchup between Georgia and Florida in Jacksonville. I also mentioned this in my last video, and I'm going to mention it again here. The Jacksonville game needs to go. It needs to go. It needs to go. Georgia needs to be playing in the swamp. Florida needs to be playing between the hedges. If everyone else in the East has to do that, they should have to do it too. And the same thing goes for the A&M Arkansas rivalry. They shouldn't. There should be no neutral site games in division games. It's just ridiculous, and it's just there for money. And I'm just really tired of having to play at Florida and at Georgia, and Georgia and Florida don't have to do that just because they're the precious little boys of the SEC East. It's really just I don't know. I just get tired of it. Anyway, Georgia won that game. Better victory than the score looks. I'm happy Georgia won. Florida did not deserve to win the East. Georgia obviously deserves it more than they do. But Georgia wins that game. And coming in at number 10, Oklahoma also had a bye. So I think 6 of my top 10 had a bye this past week. So let's go ahead and jump into Week 11. Starting at number 10, Oklahoma. They play Iowa State at home. Apparently, Oklahoma fans believe that playing Iowa State on the road is always a tricky one, but they give it at home here. I don't expect Oklahoma to lose this game or really any other game. I don't know where the Baylor game is played, if it's in Oklahoma or at Baylor, but I guess that's their best chance to lose, and I don't think they'll lose that game either. But Yeah, I'm picking Oklahoma here to beat Iowa State and to remain in my top 10. Coming in at number 9, I have Georgia. They have Missouri at home. I don't expect Georgia to lose this game. It's possible they could lose another game. I think they have three SEC games and the Georgia Tech game left on their schedule. The only game I could really see them dropping is the Auburn game. I think Kirby Smart is 0-3 in games on the road against Western opponents. And so that's definitely a game Georgia could lose. I don't see them losing this game to Missouri. So I have Georgia winning that one. Coming in at number 8, I have Oregon. They are on a bye this week, so they'll remain in my top 10. Minnesota comes in at number 7. They get Penn State at home. It's hard not to pick Penn State in this game, just given their history. Minnesota, some people say they're the worst undefeated team. Not to expect anything out of them. They did just beat the absolute hell out of Maryland, like a good team is supposed to do. If you're in the top 10 and you play a team that isn't even ranked, you're supposed to beat the hell out of them, and that's what they did. I got to pick Penn State in this one. Too much experience, but I'll be pulling for Minnesota. I think it'll be far more interesting for college football if Minnesota beats Penn State and Minnesota remains undefeated. That'll be a big story in college football. I don't think anyone expects it to happen, but I'm going to pick Penn State, but I will be pulling for Minnesota to win the game. Let's see, 10, 9, 8, 7. Coming in at number 6, I have Baylor. They play at TCU. Baylor just barely beat West Virginia. I'm not sure about how good TCU is. I haven't watched them play this year. Just given the fact that this is a road game, I feel like Baylor could slip up here. Again, I'm pulling for Baylor. I want Baylor to be, Baylor and Minnesota right now are like in the same position for me in terms of like just being that kind of like catastrophic ingredient. And just really unexpected. Those two teams are very unexpected to be where they are right now. I'll be pulling for Baylor. I want them to remain undefeated, just to keep things interesting. But I would not be surprised if Baylor lost. I'm going to pick Baylor in this one, mainly because I'm pulling for them. But I'm picking Baylor to beat TCU at TCU. Okay, coming at number 5, I have Penn State. Just talked about this game. They're on the road at Minnesota. Really no need to talk about it any further. Like I said, picking Penn State, pulling for Minnesota. Okay, number 4, Ohio State. They get Maryland at home. This is just going to be another beatdown for Ohio State. If Minnesota can absolutely destroy Maryland, imagine what Ohio State can do to Maryland. And it's at Ohio State. This game isn't even going to be watchable. It's just going to be an absolute thrashing. There's no way Ohio State loses that game. I'm picking Ohio State in that game against Maryland. Okay, coming at number 3, LSU. Obviously, they have the game of the year so far against Alabama. It's at Alabama. I don't have it here that it's at Alabama, but it is. It's at Alabama. This one's tough. I'm pulling for LSU just because I think everyone's tired of the same old Alabama story year after year. I'm definitely pulling for LSU. I'm actually going to pick LSU also. I think that Burrow has just a better resume. I know Tua is obviously a good quarterback. I'm trying to think of quarterback duels that Tua has been in. And obviously my mind goes to the national championship last year where he was completely outmatched by Clemson's Trevor Lawrence. And I cannot think Correct me in the comments below if I'm wrong. I cannot think of another game Tua has played where he's gone up against a quarterback on the other team that had as much hype as he does. So far this season, you have to say, given the fact that LSU has better wins, Burrow right now is definitely the more impressive quarterback between those two. He's got this edge about him, and through that, this whole team has this edge. I feel confident that LSU will go in there and beat Alabama. It'll be interesting if it's a close victory. I have this idea I'm going to talk about after I reveal my top 10 here, but yeah, I'll save it for after that. But I'm picking LSU to beat Alabama in this game. Close game, just like everyone else thinks. Probably a 3-point victory, but yeah, I'm picking LSU. Coming in number 2, have Alabama. Just talked about this game. Like I said, I'm picking LSU to win that game. And coming in number 1, they've been there all year. Clemson. They play at NC State. Clemson, after that North Carolina game, they're not going to allow another slip up. If they're going to lose, it's because they're going to get beat. So they're not going to. I expect a blowout here. I don't know about 59-14, but I expect at least a 21-point victory in this game for Clemson. Clemson's just going to keep rolling and remain at number 1 in my ranking. So this situation I mentioned earlier, it's interesting. There are 4 available slots for the playoff. And I was thinking to myself, if LSU beats Alabama by a little bit in a very competitive game, and then LSU and Georgia play each other in the SEC championship game, and Georgia beats LSU by a little bit in a very competitive game, that would make Georgia a 1-loss SEC champion. Obviously, they're in the playoff. LSU would sit there with a 1 loss against the SEC champion, very close loss. They could definitely sneak in as well with Georgia into the playoff if things go right outside of their conference. And here's the interesting thing. If that happens, you would still have Alabama sitting there with a very close loss to LSU, who's obviously very good. And let's say after the LSU game, after Alabama has lost to LSU, that they go on and win their remaining 3 or 4 games. And let's say they kill Auburn. Let's say they destroy Auburn. You would be sitting there with a 1-loss Georgia SEC champion, a 1-loss LSU, who won their division, and a 1-loss Alabama. Now, I'm not saying that all 3 of them will be in the playoff. I don't believe that's possible, given the fact that you have Clemson sitting there, Ohio State sitting there, Oregon in the mix. You have too many people outside of that conference for that to happen. What's interesting about that situation is that you would have it where Georgia's a lock in that situation. LSU could sneak in. And you would have a 1-loss Alabama being left out of the playoff. And it would be rightfully so. And this is why I believe that the 4-team playoff is so great. Because if that were to happen, exactly as I said, you would have Alabama fans looking back at that LSU game as a playoff game. And if we were to have an 8-team playoff, this LSU-Alabama game that we're all ready to watch, it would not have the impact that it does. It wouldn't have the anticipation because let's say this year we did have an 8-team playoff. No one really would be worried about losing this game. Obviously, you want to win. But if you're an LSU or Alabama fan, if you lose this game by a little bit, in an 8-team playoff, you're still a lock. You're still going to be there. So it makes this game not as important. You know what I mean? If it goes the way I said, and Alabama loses this game by a little bit, with there being an 8-team playoff, you know they're going to be one of those 8 teams, and that's so boring. I don't want to go into this LSU-Alabama game knowing that it doesn't really matter who wins or loses this game, because the loser is going to make the 8-team playoff anyway. If we had an 8-team playoff, the last month, the November of college football, which is without a doubt the best month, it's where things really come to a head, it wouldn't have the impact that it does. Because all great teams like Alabama, LSU, Clemson, they would just have to coast the rest of the year. They wouldn't have that pressure of remaining undefeated. Or like I say, in this situation, if Alabama loses, they're going to have to win those next 3 games and really do it in commanding fashion to want a chance to enter the playoff. So I'm very much against this whole 8-team playoff idea. I'm afraid that it will actually happen because of money. There's a lot of money involved. It will really handicap the regular season, which is the best regular season in all of sports on this entire planet. College football has the best regular season of any sport on the planet. Let's see, there's something else I wanted to mention. Right, well, yeah, anyway, that's my argument against the 8-team playoff. Now, this is what I wanted to mention. A 5-team playoff, I can get behind. But that's my limit. I don't want any more than 5 teams. And the reason I say 5 teams is because there are 5 major conferences, power conferences. And why that would be fun is because you would have an opportunity to have a representative of every conference in the playoff. And what you could do is have it where throughout the regular season, everyone is fighting for the number 1 ranking so that they could get a 2-week bye. Think about it. If you finish the season ranked number 1, you would have teams 2 through 5 in a playoff to play the number 1 team. So you would want, as a team, you would want those that 2-week bye for injuries, practice, whatever. That would be a very precious thing to have, that number 1 ranking, to where you could sit back for 2 weeks, practice, recover, watch these 4 teams battle it out to play you, and you could prepare yourself that way. Because let's take our top 5 right now: Clemson, Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, Penn State. And let's say the season ended this past weekend, and these are our top 5. Basically, you would have Clemson sitting out for 2 weeks as the number 1 team. Alabama would play Penn State. LSU would play Ohio State, just like we do now. And let's say LSU and Penn State won. Then LSU and Penn State would have to play each other. And the winner of that would play Clemson, the number 1 team. So obviously you see the advantage of having the number 1 ranking and having all these teams duking it out for that number 1 ranking would be pretty neat, because right now you just want to make the top 4 just so you have that chance. But if you were to do a 5-team playoff in that way, I would be okay with that. But if it meant going to an 8-team playoff, just keep it the way it is. Really, just keep it the way it is. They haven't really gotten it wrong. You can say that, Georgia probably Georgia should have. You could argue Georgia should have had Notre Dame's spot last year. I would argue against that only because Georgia had their shot against Alabama. They had their shot, and they choked it away just like the year before. Notre Dame went undefeated. So even though that Clemson-Notre Dame game was bad, and not very entertaining. I'm okay with Notre Dame getting that spot last year. However, I do believe Notre Dame really needs to join the conference. They really need to join the Big Ten. Find another team that you can throw in the Big Ten with them to even it out. But they really need to join the conference, because I do not like knowing that they're out there and that they play one less game than everyone else in the playoff. I don't think anybody likes that, and I believe most people would wish that Notre Dame would join the conference. But anyway, that's my top 10 for Week 11. I'll run back through it real quick. Clemson, Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, Penn State, Baylor, Minnesota, Oregon, Georgia, Oklahoma. I believe it's the exact same top 10 I had last week. But if I miss anything, let me know in the comments. If you agree or disagree with anything, also let me know in the comments. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe and hit that notification bell for future videos. And y'all have a good one.